The rain-slicked streets of San Francisco glistened under the streetlights. And I was late. My sneakers slapped against the pavement as I sprinted toward the diner. Heart pounding. Not just from the run, but from the weight of what I was about to do. My best friend, Ethan, had begged me to help his dad. And I couldn't say it to him. Not ever. I pushed through the diner's glass door, the bell jingling harshly. The place smelled of coffee and fried onions. A familiar comfort that did little to calm my nerves. Ethan was waiting in a corner booth, his lanky frame hunched over a cup of black coffee, his eyes darting to the door the moment I walked in. "Jake, you're late," Ethan said, his voice low but sharp, like he was holding back a storm. His dark hair fell into his eyes, and he pushed it back with a shaky hand. "I thought you bailed." "I wouldn't bail on you," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. My damp jacket clung to my shoulders, and I shivered. Not entirely from the cold. "You said it was urgent. What's going on with your dad?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He's in trouble, Jake. Big trouble. And I can't fix it alone." I'd known Ethan since we were kids, growing up in the same scrappy neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. He was the brother I never had, the one who'd shared his lunch when my mom couldn't afford to pack one, the one who'd stayed up with me after my first heartbreak, talking me through the ache. So when he said his dad needed help, I was all in, no questions asked. At least, not yet. Ethan's dad, Michael, was a mystery to me. I'd only met him a handful of times over the years. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a quiet intensity, always polite but distant, like he carried a weight he didn't share. Ethan rarely talked about him, only dropping bits and pieces. Michael was a private investigator, worked odd hours, kept to himself. I pictured a grizzled guy in a trench coat, chain-smoking and chasing leads in dark alleys. But Ethan's face now pale, eyes wide with something like fear, told me this was more than a late-night stakeout gone wrong. "He's been working a case," Ethan said, his fingers tightening around his coffee mug. "Something dangerous. He won't tell me everything, but I know he's in over his head. There's this guy, some big-shot lawyer, and Dad's got something on him. Something bad. And now they're coming for him." "Who's they?" I asked, my stomach twisting. I wasn't exactly the hero type. At 24, I was just a barista with a half-finished community college degree and a knack for fixing things computers. Mostly, not lives. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But he's scared. Jake. I've never seen him like this. He's hiding out at his cabin up in Marin County, and he needs someone to help him sort through the evidence he's got. He trusts me, and I trust you." I swallowed hard. "Why me? I'm not exactly a detective." Ethan's eyes softened, but there was a desperation in them. "Because you're smart, Jake. You see things other people miss. And you're good with tech. He's got files, digital stuff. Encrypted, maybe. I can't do this without you." I wanted to argue, to tell him I wasn't cut out for this. But the way he looked at me like I was his last hope shut me up. I owed Ethan too much to walk away. "Okay," I said finally. "I'm in. When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning," Ethan said, relief flooding his face. "I'll drive. Just don't tell anyone. Okay? Not even your mom." I nodded. but my mind was already racing. What kind of trouble was Michael in? And why did I feel like I was stepping into something I wouldn't come back from unchanged? The next morning, we hit the road before dawn. The city was still asleep, the fog thick as we crossed the Golden Gate Bridge. Ethan barely spoke, his hands tight on the steering wheel. And I didn't push him. My backpack sat at my feet, stuffed with my laptop, a change of clothes, and a nagging sense of dread. The cabin was tucked deep in the redwoods, a small, weathered place that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the silence was heavy, broken only by the crunch of gravel under our tires. When we pulled up, Michael was waiting on the porch, a shadow in the early light. He was taller than I remembered, his dark hair streaked with gray, his jaw set like he was braced for a fight. But his eyes deep, stormy blue caught me off guard. They held something raw, something that made my chest tighten for reasons I couldn't name. "Ethan," Michael said, his voice rough but warm as he hugged his son. Then his gaze landed on me, and I felt like he was seeing right through me. "Jake, thanks for coming." I nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. "No problem," I managed, but my voice sounded too small. Inside, the cabin was sparse but cozy, with a wood stove in the corner and stacks of papers scattered across a worn table. Michael gestured for us to sit, and I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands moved with purpose but never quite steadied. "I need you to understand something," Michael said, his eyes locking onto mine. "What we're doing here right's risky. If you want to walk away, now's the time." I glanced at Ethan, who was watching me with that same desperate hope. My heart thudded, but I shook my head. "I'm not going anywhere." Michael studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, let's get to work." He pulled out a laptop, older than mine but sturdy, and slid it toward me. "There's a drive on there, encrypted. I need you to crack it. It's got everything I've got on this case: names, dates, transactions. If we don't figure this out, people could get hurt, including me." I opened the laptop, my fingers hovering over the keys. This wasn't just fixing a computer. This was diving into something dark, something real. And yet, as I looked at Michael, his steady gaze anchoring me, I felt a spark of something I hadn't expected, not just determination, but a pull, like gravity, drawing me toward him. What had I just agreed to? The cabin's dim light cast long shadows across the table as I stared at the laptop screen, its encryption software glaring back like a taunt. My fingers danced over the keys, probing the system for weaknesses, but my mind kept drifting to Michael. He sat across from me, sorting through a stack of handwritten notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Every now and then, he'd glance up, and our eyes would meet brief, electric moments that left me unsteady. "Any progress?" Michael asked, his voice low, cutting through the silence. I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. "It's a tough one. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. Military-grade encryption. Maybe. I'll need time." "We don't have much of that," he said, leaning back in his chair, his flannel shirt stretched across his shoulders, and I caught myself staring a little too long. I looked away, heat creeping up my neck. What was wrong with me? This was Ethan's dad. For God's sake. Ethan was outside, chopping wood for the stove, the rhythmic thwack of the axe echoing through the walls. He'd been quiet all morning, his usual chatter replaced by a tense energy that made me uneasy. I wanted to ask him what he wasn't telling me, but Michael's presence kept me rooted to the task at hand. "Tell me about the case," I said, needing a distraction. "What's on this drive that's worth all this?" Michael hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's about a man named Victor Lang. Big lawyer in the city. Represents some powerful people. Politicians. CEOs. You name it. I was hired to look into him discreetly. Found out he's been funneling money through shell companies. Hiding something big. I don't know what yet. But it's bad enough that he's got people watching me." "Watching you?" My stomach dropped. "Like, following you?" "Worse," he said, his voice grim. "Last week, someone broke into my office. Took nothing, but left a messagey photo of me and Ethan, taken from across the street. They're letting me know they can get to us." I glanced at the door, half expecting someone to burst through. "And the drive?" "It's got the proof," Michael said. "Bank records. Emails. A paper trail. If we can decrypt it, we can expose Lang. But if we don't," he trailed off, his eyes darkening. I swallowed hard, the weight of it settling over me. This wasn't just a favor for Ethan anymore. This was dangerous, and I was in deep. But as I looked at Michael, his steady resolve masking a flicker of fear, I felt something shift inside me. I wanted to protect him not just because of Ethan, but because of something I couldn't yet name. By late afternoon, I'd made some progress on the encryption. Enough to crack a few outer layers, but not the core files. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, and my head throbbed from the pressure. Ethan had come back inside, his face flushed from the cold, and was now pacing the small living room like a caged animal. "Jake, you got anything yet?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I'm working on it," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "It's not like I do this every day." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. "We can't just sit here. If they find us..." "Enough," Michael cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. "Jake's doing his best. Let him work." Ethan stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry. I'm scared. Dad." Michael's face softened, and he stood, crossing the room to pull Ethan into a hug. "I know. Kid. We're gonna figure this out. Together." I watched them, my chest tightening. Ethan and Michael had always been close, but seeing them like this vulnerable, human made me feel like an intruder. And yet, Michael's presence was grounding, his strength a quiet anchor in the chaos. I turned back to the laptop, determined to prove I could handle this. As night fell, the cabin grew colder, the wood stove struggling to keep up. Michael built up the fire while Ethan crashed on the couch, exhaustion finally winning out. I stayed at the table, my fingers flying over the keys, chasing a lead I'd found in the code. Michael sat beside me, closer than before, his arm brushing mine as he leaned in to look at the screen. "You're good at this," he said quietly, his breath warm against my cheek. I shrugged, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. "I just mess around with computers. Nothing special." It's special to me, he said, and there was something in his voice gratitude. Maybe, but also something deeper. Our eyes met again, and this time, neither of us looked away. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to focus. I think I'm close. There's a back door in the encryption, but it's tricky. If I screw this up, the whole drive could wipe itself. Michael nodded, his expression unreadable. I trust you, Jake. Those words hit harder than they should have. I wasn't used to being trusted not like this, not with something that could mean life or death. And yet, as I looked at him, his steady gaze holding mine, I felt like I could do anything. By midnight, I'd cracked the back door, accessing a single filial list of names, dates, and dollar amounts. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Michael read over my shoulder, his presence steadying me even as my heart raced. This is it, he said, his voice low with awe. This is what they're after. I turned to him, our faces inches apart. What do we do now? His eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But then he pulled back, his expression guarded again. We keep going, he said. We don't stop until we've got it all. I nodded, but as I turned back to the screen, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was starting, something neither of us was ready to face. The next morning, the cabin felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken tension. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ethan arguing with Michael in hushed tones. I stayed on the couch, pretending to sleep, catching fragments of their conversation. That you should have told me sooner, Ethan was saying, his voice tight. I could have helped. You're helping now? Michael replied, calm but firm. Bringing Jake was the right call. I opened my eyes, catching Michael's glance as he spoke. He didn't look away, and my heart did a strange flip. I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes, trying to act normal. Morning, I mumbled, heading for the coffee pot. Ethan shot me a look, half relieved, half anxious. You get anything else from the drive last night? A list, I said, pouring a cup. Names, dates, some numbers. Not enough to piece it together yet. Michael nodded, his expression unreadable. It's a start. We need to keep digging. We spent the day poring over the data. I worked on the laptop, teasing out more files from the drive, while Michael and Ethan cross-referenced the names with his old case notes. The list was a tangle of aliases and shell companies, but one name kept popping up, Victor Lang. Every transaction seemed to loop back to him, like he was the center of a web we couldn't fully see. By afternoon, I'd cracked another Phileas set of emails between Lang and an unknown contact. The language was cryptic, full of coded phrases. But one line stood out: the shipment arrives Friday. Ensure silence. My stomach churned as I read it aloud. Shipment? Ethan asked, his voice sharp. What the hell does that mean? Michael's face darkened. Could be anything: drugs, weapons. Worse. Lang's got his hands in a lot of dirty deals. I glanced at Michael, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. You think this is what they're after? Whatever this shipment is. Maybe. he said, his voice low. Or maybe it's just part of it. Lang's careful. He doesn't leave loose ends. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to ask more. But Ethan's pacing was making me jumpy. And Michael's focus was razor sharp. Like he was bracing for a fight. I turned back to the laptop, determined to find something useful. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Michael asked me to take a walk with him. Ethan was napping, exhausted from the stress, and the cabin felt too small for the thoughts swirling in my head. We stepped outside, the air cool and sharp, the forest alive with the hum of crickets. "You're holding up better than I expected," Michael said as we walked a narrow trail, the redwoods towering above us. His voice was softer now, less guarded. I laughed, a little bitter. "I'm freaking out inside, if that's what you mean." He stopped, turning to face me. "You don't show it. That's what matters." His eyes held mine, and I felt that pull again, stronger this time. I shoved my hands in my pockets, trying to steady myself. "Why'd you let me come along? Ethan's right, I am not exactly qualified for this." Michael's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're more qualified than you think. You've got a good head, Jake, and heart. That's harder to come by." My face burned, and I looked away, focusing on the dirt under my feet. I just don't want to let Ethan down. Or you. "You won't," he said, his voice quiet but certain. He stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought he might touch a hand on my shoulder. Maybe, but he didn't. Instead, he turned and started walking again, leaving me to catch up. We didn't talk much after that, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged with something neither of us was ready to name. When we got back to the cabin, Ethan was awake, looking at us with a strange expression, like he'd sensed something shift. "You two okay?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "Yeah," I said quickly, avoiding Michael's gaze. "Just needed some air." Ethan didn't push, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. As we settled back into work, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line one I wasn't sure I could come back from. By nightfall, I'd cracked another layer of the drive, revealing a map with marked locations across the city. One was a warehouse in the Mission District, circled in red. Michael studied it, his face grim. "That's where the shipment's going," he said. "We need to check it out." Ethan's head snapped up. "You're not going there, Dad. It's too dangerous." "I don't have a choice," Michael said, his voice hard. "If we don't stop this, it's not just me they'll come for. It's you. And Jake." My heart stopped. "Me?" Michael's eyes met mine, and there was something raw in them, fear, but also something softer. "You're in this now, Jake. I'm sorry." I wanted to be angry, to tell him I didn't sign up for this. But the way he looked at me made it impossible. I nodded, my throat tight. "Then we do this together." Ethan looked between us, his expression unreadable. "Fine," he said finally. "But we're not going in blind. We need a plan." As we sat around the table, mapping out our next move, I couldn't ignore the way my heart raced every time Michael's hand brushed mine, or the way his voice steadied me even as the danger grew. I was in over my head not just with the case, but with him. The drive back to San Francisco was tense. The city lights a stark contrast to the quiet of the redwoods. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, while Michael sat in the back, his eyes scanning the road like he expected trouble at every turn. I sat shotgun, my laptop open, trying to pull more from the drive before we reached the warehouse. The map's red circle burned in my window warning. A promise. You sure about this? I asked Michael, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. No, he said, his voice steady despite the admission. But we can't wait. If that shipment's what I think it is, we need to know now. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I could feel the weight of his worry, and it mirrored my own. We were walking into something big, something that could swallow us whole. And yet, as I caught Michael's eyes in the mirror, I felt a strange calm. He believed in me, and that was enough to keep me going. We parked a block from the warehouse, the Mission District alive with late-night noise music spilling from bars, the hum of traffic. The warehouse itself was a hulking shadow, its windows dark, its walls tagged with faded graffiti. Michael led the way, moving with a quiet confidence that made my heart race for all the wrong reasons. Stay close, he whispered, his hand brushing my arm as we slipped through a side alley. The touch lingered, sending a jolt through me, but I pushed it down. Focus, Jake. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of crates and shadows, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of oil. We moved silently, Michael in the lead, Ethan and I trailing behind. My heart pounded so loud I was sure someone would hear it. Then we saw Ida's stack of crates in the corner, marked with the same coded symbols from the emails. Michael crouched beside one, prying it open with a crowbar. Inside were metal canisters, unmarked but heavy, their surfaces cold to the touch. This isn't drugs, he said, his voice low. This is something else. Before I could ask what, a noise cut through the silencia, metallic clang from the far end of the warehouse. Michael froze, his hand on my wrist, pulling me down behind a crate. Ethan crouched beside us, his breath ragged. Someone's here, Michael whispered, his eyes scanning the darkness. My pulse raced, but his grip on my wrist was steady, grounding. I wanted to say something, to ask what the hell we were doing, but his closeness silenced me. His face was inches from mine, his breath warm against my cheek. And for a moment, the danger faded. All I could see was him. The sound came again, closer this time, footsteps, deliberate and heavy. Michael's hand tightened on my wrist, and he mouthed, "Stay here." Then he was gone, slipping into the shadows like a ghost. Ethan grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. "We need to get out of here, Jake." "Not without him," I hissed, surprising myself with the fierceness in my voice. Ethan stared at me, something unreadable in his expression, but he nodded. We waited, the seconds stretching into eternity. Then a shout broke the silence, followed by the sound of a struggle. My heart lurched, and before I could think, I was moving toward the noise, Ethan cursing under his breath as he followed. We found Michael grappling with a man in a dark jacket, both of them slamming against a crate. The man was bigger, but Michael was faster, landing a punch that sent the stranger staggering. I grabbed a piece of pipe from the floor, ready to jump in. But Michael waved me off. "Get back," he shouted, just as the man lunged again. Ethan pulled me behind a crate, his grip tight. "Let him handle it," he said, but his voice shook. The fight was brutal. Quick. Michael pinned the man to the ground, his knee on his chest. But not before the stranger got a good hit in, splitting Michael's lip. Blood dripped onto the concrete, and I felt a surge of panic I couldn't explain. "Who sent you?" Michael demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're already dead, Walsh. You and your kid." Michael's face hardened, and he knocked the man out with a single blow. He stood, breathing hard, his eyes finding mine in the dim light. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He was hurt, and all I wanted was to reach out, to make sure he was real. But Ethan was there, watching us both. "We need to move," Michael said, wiping blood from his lip. "They know we're here." Back in the car, the tension was suffocating. Ethan drove, his eyes fixed on the road, while Michael sat beside me in the back, cleaning his split lip with a rag. I wanted to say something, to ask if he was okay, but the words wouldn't come. "You shouldn't have gone after him," Ethan said finally, his voice tight. "You could have gotten killed." "I've handled worse," Michael said, but there was a weariness in his tone that hadn't been there before. I glanced at him, my heart still racing from the warehouse. "What were those canisters?" I asked. Michael hesitated, his eyes meeting mine. "I don't know yet. But whatever it is, Lang's willing to kill to keep it quiet." The weight of his words settled over us, and I felt the world shift. This wasn't just about helping Ethan's dad anymore. This was about survival and something else. Something growing between me and Michael that I couldn't ignore, no matter how dangerous it was. We didn't go back to the cabin. Michael said it wasn't safe anymore. Not after the warehouse. Instead, we holed up in a cheap motel on the edge of the city. The kind with flickering neon signs and stained carpets. The room smelled of stale cigarettes, but it was better than being out in the open. Ethan collapsed onto one of the beds, his face pale, while Michael paced, his energy restless, like a caged lion. I sat at the small table, my laptop open, digging through the drive's remaining files. The encounter at the warehouse had lit a fire under me needed answers. Not just for Michael, but for myself. The canisters, the coded emails, Lang's name tying it all together. It was a puzzle, and I was determined to solve it. "You need to sleep," Michael said, stopping beside me. His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it, like he was worried about more than just the case. "I'm fine," I lied, my eyes burning from the screen. "We're close. I can feel it." He pulled a chair up next to me, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. "You're pushing too hard, Jake. You'll burn out." I met his gaze, and there it was again, that pull, that unspoken thing between us. "I can't stop," I said quietly. "Not when you're in danger." His expression softened, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more. But then Ethan stirred on the bed, and Michael pulled back, the moment broken. "We need to figure out what those canisters are," Michael said, his voice all business again. If we can tie them to Lang, we've got him. I nodded, turning back to the laptop. The next file I cracked was a manifest, listing the canisters as chemical samples headed for an offshore buyer. The details were vague, but the implications were chilling. I read it aloud, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Chemicals. Ethan sat up, his eyes wide. Like weapons. Maybe, Michael said, his face grim. Or something experimental. Lang's clients aren't exactly humanitarians. We spent the next hour piecing together what we could. The manifest pointed to a lab in Oakland, one of Lang's shell companies. Michael wanted to check it out, but Ethan was adamant no more risks until we had a plan. I agreed, but the look in Michael's eyes told me he wasn't waiting for permission. That night, I couldn't sleep. The motel's thin walls did little to block the sound of traffic, and my mind was a mess of code, danger, and Michael's face. I slipped outside, needing air, and found him sitting on the curb, staring at the stars. Couldn't sleep either. I asked, sitting beside him. He shook his head, his eyes distant. I keep thinking about Ethan. If anything happens to him because of me, it won't, I said, my voice fiercer than I intended. We'll figure this out. He turned to me, his gaze intense. You're too good for this, Jake. You shouldn't be mixed up in my mess. I chose to be here, I said, my heart pounding. For Ethan. And for you. The words hung between us, raw and unguarded. Michael's eyes searched mine, and I saw something shift, something that mirrored the ache in my chest. He reached out, his hand resting on mine, warm and steady. Jake, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's complicated. I know, I said, my throat tight. But I can't help it. For a moment, we just sat there, his hand on mine, the world narrowing to the space between us. Then he pulled away, standing abruptly. We can't, he said, his voice rough. Not now. Not with all this. I nodded, my chest aching. But I understood. The case. Ethan. The danger, it was too much. But as I watched him walk back to the motel, I knew I was already too far gone. The next morning, we headed to the lab in Oakland. It was a low, unmarked building in an industrial park, surrounded by chain-link fences. Michael had a plan: sneak in, find evidence, get out. But as we approached, I noticed a black SUV parked nearby, its windows tinted. My stomach twisted. Michael, I whispered, grabbing his arm. We're not alone. He followed my gaze, his face hardening. Stay with Ethan. I'll check it out. No, I said, surprising myself. We do this together. He looked at me, something like pride in his eyes, and nodded. We moved as a unit, slipping through a gap in the fence, my heart pounding with every step. Inside, the lab was sterile, all white walls and humming machines. We found a computer terminal, and I got to work, hacking into the system while Michael and Ethan kept watch. The files confirmed our worst fears. The canisters contained a synthetic compound, untested, designed for behavioral modification. The implications were horrifying: mind control, coercion, worse. And Lang's name was all over it. "We've got him," I whispered, downloading the files to a USB drive. But before we could celebrate, the lights flickered, and an alarm blared. Michael grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the exit. But it was too late. Men in dark suits were already blocking the way, their faces cold and unyielding. "Run," Michael said, shoving me toward a side door. But as we sprinted, I knew we were out of time and out of options. The side door slammed shut behind us, but the sound of boots on concrete told me we weren't free yet. We sprinted through the industrial park, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. Michael led the way, his hand gripping mine, pulling me along as Ethan kept pace beside us. The night air was sharp, cutting through my panic. But all I could think about was keeping that drive safe and keeping Michael alive. "Over here," Michael hissed, veering toward a narrow alley between two buildings. We ducked behind a dumpster, our breaths ragged, as the sound of pursuit grew closer. I pressed myself against the wall, Michael's body shielding mine, his warmth a stark contrast to the cold metal at my back. "They're too close," Ethan whispered, his eyes darting to the alley's entrance. "We can't outrun them." "We don't have to," Michael said, his voice low and steady. "We just need to get to the car." I nodded, clutching the USB drive. The files were our leverage, our proof against Lang. If we lost them, we lost everything. But as I looked at Michael, his face set with determination, I realized I was fighting for more than just the truth. The footsteps stopped, and a voice called out, cold and commanding. "Walsh, we know you're here. Hand over the drive. And this ends clean." Michael's jaw tightened, and he motioned for us to stay quiet. He peered around the dumpster, his body tense, then turned back to me. "Jake, you and Ethan get to the car. I'll distract them." "No way," I said, my voice fiercer than I felt. "We're not leaving you." "Jake." "Listen," he started, but I cut him off. "No. We do this together. Or not at all." His eyes softened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But then he nodded, a flicker of something like admiration in his gaze. "All right. Together." Ethan looked between us, his expression unreadable. But he didn't argue. We waited, the seconds stretching, until the footsteps moved away. Michael signaled, and we bolted, sprinting toward the car parked a block away. My lungs burned, but I kept moving, fueled by adrenaline and the weight of Michael's trust. We reached the car, piling in as Michael took the wheel. The engine roared to life, and we peeled out, the SUV's headlights flashing in the rearview mirror. They were on us, and they weren't stopping. "Hold on," Michael said, swerving through traffic. I gripped the USB drive, my heart pounding as I glanced at him. His focus was absolute, but there was a tremor in his hands, a crack in his calm that made my chest ache. We lost the SUV after a tense chase through the city, Michael's driving skills outmatching our pursuers. By the time we pulled into a quiet residential street, my nerves were shot, but we were alive. Michael parked in a dark alley, cutting the engine. "We need to lay low," he said, his voice rough. "They'll be looking for us." Ethan nodded, his face pale. What now? We've got the files. But what do we do with them? We expose Lang, I said, surprising myself with my own certainty. We get this to someone who can make it public, someone who can't be bought. Michael looked at me, his eyes searching. You sure about this? Jake, once we do this, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said, meeting his gaze. This is bigger than us. He nodded, a ghost of a smile on his lips. You're something else. You know that. My face heated, and I looked away, but not before Ethan caught the exchange. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. The tension between us was growing, and I wasn't sure how much longer we could ignore it. We found a safe house, a friend of Michael's who owed him a favor. It was a small apartment in the Tenderloin, cramped but secure. We spent the night sorting through the files, piecing together the full scope of Lang's operation. The chemical compound was part of a larger scheme: experimental drugs meant to manipulate behavior, sold to private security firms and worse. Lang was the middleman, but the real players were higher up. Names we didn't recognize, but Michael did. These are powerful people, he said, his voice low. If we go after them, we're painting a target on our backs. Then we move fast, I said, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I copied the files to a secure server. We leak this anonymously. Let the press tear it apart. Ethan watched me, his expression conflicted. You're really in this, aren't you? I met his gaze, my heart heavy. I have to be. He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said enough. He knew something was changing between me and Michael, between all of us, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. As dawn broke, Michael and I sat alone at the kitchen table, Ethan asleep in the next room. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. I looked at him, his face bruised from the warehouse fight, his eyes tired but warm. Thank you, he said softly, for sticking with this. With me. I swallowed, my throat tight. I couldn't walk away if I wanted to. His hand reached for mine, tentative. And this time, I didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined. And for a moment, the world was just us, no danger. No files. No Ethan sleeping 10 feet away. Just us. But the moment didn't last. A phone buzzed Michael's burner. He answered, his face darkening as he listened. When he hung up, he looked at me, his eyes grim. They found us, he said. We need to move. Now. We didn't have time to think. Michael grabbed his bag. I stuffed the laptop and USB drive into mine. And Ethan was already on his feet, his face pale but resolute. The safe house wasn't safe anymore, and the reality of that hit like a punch. We slipped out the back, moving through the pre-dawn streets, the city still half asleep around us. Michael led us to a parking garage, where an old sedan waited, another favor from his network of contacts. We piled in, my heart racing as I clutched the laptop. The files were our lifeline, but they were also a death sentence if Lang's people got to us first. Where are we going? Ethan asked, his voice tight. There's a reporter I know, Michael said, his eyes on the road. Sarah Klein. Works for the Chronicle. She's clean, and she's got the guts to run a story like this. I nodded, pulling up Klein's contact info on my phone. I'd already sent her an encrypted teaser of the files, just enough to hook her without exposing us. She'd agreed to meet, but the location, a crowded diner in Chinatown, felt like a gamble. As we drove, I caught Ethan watching me in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He shrugged, looking away. "Just didn't expect this to be our lives. You know." I wanted to reach out, to tell him we'd get through this, but the words felt hollow. The truth was, I didn't know if we would, and the growing tension between me and Michael wasn't helping. The diner was packed, the air thick with the smell of fried dumplings and coffee. Sarah Klein sat in a corner booth, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense vibe. She barely looked up as we slid in across from her, her attention fixed on a tablet. "You've got 5 minutes to convince me," she said, her voice clipped. "What's this about?" Michael leaned forward, his voice low. "Victor Lang's running an Operation Experimental Drugs. Behavioral control. We've got proof. Bank records. Emails. Manifests. It's all on a drive." Her eyes flicked to me, then back to Michael. "And you're telling me this why?" "Because you're the only one who'll print it," I said, sliding the USB drive across the table. "This isn't just about Lang. It's bigger people with power. People who don't want this out." She studied me, then picked up the drive, plugging it into her tablet. Her expression didn't change as she scrolled through the files, but I saw her fingers pause, her breath catch. "This is explosive," she said finally. "You're sure it's legit?" "Positive," Michael said. "But we're out of time. Lang's people are on us." Sarah nodded, slipping the drive into her pocket. "I'll need a day to verify this. If it checks out, I'll run it. But you three need to disappear." "We're working on it," Michael said, his voice grim. As we left the diner, I felt a flicker of hope. If Sarah could get the story out, we might actually win this. But as we stepped onto the street, a black SUV pulled up, and my heart sank. They'd found us again. "Run!" Michael shouted, grabbing my arm. We sprinted through the crowded streets, weaving through vendors and tourists, the SUV's engine roaring behind us. Ethan kept pace, his face set with determination, but I could see the fear in his eyes. We ducked into an alley, pressing ourselves against the wall as the SUV roared past. My chest heaved, and Michael's hand was still on my arm, his touch grounding me even as my mind raced. "We can't keep running," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to end this." Michael nodded, his eyes fierce. "We will. But first, we need to stay alive." We spent the day moving, never staying in one place too long. Michael's contacts got us another car, and we headed north, toward a safe house in Sonoma. The drive was quiet, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Ethan stared out the window, his silence heavy, while Michael drove, his hands steady but his eyes distant. I couldn't stop thinking about the moment in the Tenderloin, his hand on mine, the way it felt like the world had stopped. I knew it was wrong. Ethan was my best friend, and Michael was his dad, but I couldn't shake it. Every glance, every touch, was pulling me deeper. That night, In the safe house, Ethan went to bed early, leaving me and Michael alone in the small living room. The silence was thick, charged with everything we hadn't said. "Jake," he started, his voice low. "What happened back there? We need to talk about it." I swallowed, my heart pounding. "I know it's complicated. Ethan, the case, everything. But I can't pretend I don't feel something." He looked at me, his eyes raw with emotion. "I feel it too. But Ethan's my son. And you're his friend. If we cross that line..." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "But I'm not sure I can stop." He stepped closer, his hand reaching for mine. And this time, he didn't pull away. Our lips met, tentative at first, then desperate, like we'd been holding back for too long. It was wrong. It was reckless. But it was real. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. "We can't do this," he whispered, but his hands didn't let go. Before I could respond, a crash came from outside, the window shattering. Michael pushed me behind him, his body tense, as the door burst open and men in dark suits stormed in. The room erupted into chaos. Michael shoved me toward the back door as two men in suits advanced, their faces cold and purposeful. Ethan stumbled out of the bedroom, his eyes wide with panic. "Dad," he shouted. But Michael was already moving, tackling one of the men to the ground. "Get out," Michael yelled, his voice sharp with urgency. I grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the exit. But he resisted, his eyes locked on his dad. "We can't leave him," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "He'll be fine," I lied, my heart pounding as I dragged him outside. The night was cold, the Sonoma Hills silent except for the sounds of struggle behind us. We ran, my laptop bag slamming against my side. The USB drive long gone, but its contents burned into my memory. We hid in a ditch by the road, our breaths visible in the chilly air. Ethan was shaking, his face pale. "They're gonna kill him," he whispered. "No, they won't," I said, gripping his shoulder. "Michael's tough. He'll get out." But as the minutes dragged on, doubt crept in. I couldn't lose him, not now. Not after everything. I started to stand, ready to go back. But Ethan grabbed my arm. "Don't be stupid, Jake. You go back. You're dead too." I met his gaze, and for the first time, I saw something else in his eyes: suspicion. Maybe. Or hurt. "What's going on with you and my dad?" he asked, his voice low. My stomach dropped. "Ethan, don't lie to me," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I've seen the way you look at him, and the way he looks at you." Before I could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows. Michael, bloodied but alive, his shirt torn. Relief flooded me, and I ran to him, stopping short when I saw the pain in his eyes. "We need to move," he said, his voice hoarse. "They're not far behind." We drove through the night. No destination, just motion. Michael's hands were steady on the wheel, but his face was drawn, the weight of everything catching up. Ethan sat in the back, silent, his earlier question hanging between us like a guillotine. By dawn, we reached a small coastal town. A place Michael said was off the grid. The house was a rundown beach cottage. Its paint peeling, but its isolation perfect. We collapsed inside. Exhausted, but safe for now. Sarah Klein called that afternoon. The story was live. Splashed across the Chronicle's front page. San Francisco lawyer linked to illegal chemical trade. The files had checked out, and the feds were already moving on Lang. But Michael wasn't celebrating. "They'll come for us," he said, staring out at the ocean. "Men like Lang don't go down without a fight." "Then we fight back," I said, stepping closer. "We've got the truth on our side." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "You're braver than you know, Jake." Ethan cleared his throat, standing in the doorway. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. "All of us." My heart sank, but I nodded. We sat at the cottage's small table, the tension thick. Ethan looked between us, his expression a mix of anger and hurt. "I know what's going on," he said finally. "You and Dad. I'm not stupid." Michael's face was unreadable, but his voice was steady. "Ethan, I didn't mean for this to happen. Neither did Jake." Ethan laughed, bitter. "Didn't mean for it. I asked you to help him, Jake. Not this." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't plan it. It just happened." Ethan stood, pacing. "You're my best friend. And you're my dad. How am I supposed to deal with this?" Michael reached for him, but Ethan pulled away. "I need time," he said, walking out the door. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Michael looked at me, his eyes raw. "I can't lose him," he said quietly. "You won't," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe we could fix this, but the truth was, I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Days passed, and the news cycle exploded. Lang was arrested, his empire crumbling under the weight of the evidence. We stayed hidden, waiting for the dust to settle. Ethan kept his distance, speaking only when necessary, and it tore at me. But Michael and I grew closer, our moments stolen in quiet corners, each touch a rebellion against the world trying to tear us apart. One night, as the waves crashed outside, Michael pulled me close, his lips finding mine in the dark. "I don't know how this ends," he whispered, "but I know I don't want to lose you." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my heart full despite the uncertainty. The next morning, Ethan found us on the porch, his expression softer but still guarded. "I'm not okay with this," he said, "but I'm not losing either of you. We're family, messed up as it is." Tears stung my eyes, and I nodded. "We'll figure it out, Ethan. Together." Michael squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I felt hope not just for us, but for all of us. Lang was gone. The truth was out, and we were still standing. The road ahead would be hard, but we'd face it together, scars and all. And in that moment, I knew love, real love, was worth every risk, every fight, every heartbeat.